Let's open in prayer before we begin our Bible study tonight. Father, we thank you for your glorious word revealed to us by you, given to us by you, breathed out by you, protected by you, handed down by you to us so that we can know you. You have revealed yourself through your word. It's how you have spoken to us, and it's how you still speak to us today. Help us as we study your word to continually have a deeper and deeper hunger for it. And Lord, may you feed that hunger. And help us as we study your word to give us greater wisdom and understanding in it. Help us to be hearers of the word and doers also. Bless our time tonight together. May we be edified by your word, encouraged by your word, and built up so that we might be better servants of you. In Jesus' name, amen. Psalm 74. This is going to be another lament psalm. This is going to be a psalm where you're going to hear at the very beginning a lament about Israel's enemies destroying the temple. It's going to be a lament about, where are you, God? You have left us. It seems like you've left us. Where are you, God? There's going to be a destruction of the temple reference. God, why haven't you protected us? God, remember your people. And God, we put our faith and trust in you. So very similar drum beats to what we're used to seeing in many of the Psalms: a lament, a response, a crying out to God, a wearing of on the sleeve of the emotions and the thoughts and the feelings of the psalmist. So let's just get into it, and we'll see what more we can learn from tonight's psalm. The subtitle of tonight's psalm is "Arise, O God, defend your cause." So the title of the psalm or the song is "Arise, O God, defend your cause." And it is a maskil of Asaph. O God, why do you cast us off forever? Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture? Remember your congregation, which you have purchased of old, which you have redeemed to be the tribe of your heritage. Remember Mount Zion, where you have dwelt. Direct your steps to the perpetual ruins. The enemy has destroyed everything in the sanctuary. Your foes have roared in the midst of your meeting place. They set up their own signs for signs. They were like those who swing axes in a forest of trees. And all its carved wood they broke down with hatchets and hammers. They set your sanctuary on fire. They profaned the dwelling place of your name, bringing it down to the ground. They said to themselves, "We will utterly subdue them." They burned all the meeting places of God in the land. We do not see our signs. There is no longer any prophet, and there is none among us who knows how long. How long, O God, is the foe to scoff? Is the enemy to revile your name forever? Why do you hold back your hand, your right hand? Take it from the fold of your garment and destroy them. We'll stop there. And once again, we'll ask the very familiar question. Question one, what is a maskil? Or what does maskil mean? It says a maskil of Asaph in the subtitle.
Well, I couldn't remember, so I cheated and looked it up.
And the
it
answer
says
is?
a person versed in Hebrew literature.
So
That's not what you
I
said.
would disagree with that. It's not a person. So the term does not mean a person. The term means insightful or to have skillful insight. So it's not necessarily referring to a person, although I could take the term maskil and use it to refer to a person. I would think it's better suited to say a maskil is, especially in this sense, it's talking about a psalm, right? So this psalm is an insightful or something that's skillful to give you insight kind of psalm. So when somebody says, hey, what is a maskil? You can say, well, it is just a type of psalm that is an insightful psalm. There you go. Now you could use that to describe a person too. It's not a muskrat. It's not a baby. It's not a baby muskrat. I think the last time you used that joke was back in Psalm 32. It's been a while. Is it? Yeah. Did it play as well this time?
We just have to look at each other.
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to mention about this psalm is that this is a psalm that's talking about the destruction of the temple by Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BC. This is the reference to this. What? Yeah, it is actually.
Hell, I have paper.
I know paper.
It's like paper for a cookie or something that's different.
Oh. Now, does it feel better paper or less?
It feels better.
Does it? Oh, it's cheaper paper. It's recycled. It's recycled.
Oh, that.
You remember those commercials where there used to be like, we brewed 2 cups of coffee. We use brand, the brand X and Folgers, right? And they bring it in. Oh, it's, this is delicious. What is this? And I'm like, oh, it's Folgers. And they're like, oh, remember? No.
I do remember.
Why is it that I always think of commercials when I'm thinking of stuff? All right, question 2. What does verse 1 mean? So what does verse 1 mean, and are these things true of God? Okay, verse 1 says, "O God, why do you cast us off forever? Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture?" So the psalmist is talking about Israel, the nation of Israel, asking God, why do you cast us off forever? Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture? So first off, what's he saying, or what's he asking? And then I want to know, are these things true of God? What's he saying first off? Oh God, why do you cast us off forever? Another way of saying that is what?
Are you angry with us?
Are you angry with us? Have you forgotten us? You've cast us off. Have you abandoned us?
It's a lot like the other Psalms when, where are you, God?
Right.
You know,
Where are you, God? What's going on?
yeah.
I feel like you're not here. Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture? What's another way of saying that? Why does your Yeah, are you angry? Why does your anger seem to smoke against the sheep of your pasture? Meaning those who believe in you. Your people, your sheep, your pasture.
They were bad.
That was a bad joke.
Love it.
This is a evening of one line.
I couldn't let that one go.
Oh, you. EWE.
Really, Michael.
You were funny.
So, are these things true of God? Has God cast them off forever?
No.
Does God's anger smoke against the sheep of his pasture?
No.
Oh?
I was going to say at times.
Ah.
Yeah. I know.
Oh, yeah.
Gotcha.
Right? That would be one where it'd be like, you give an answer and then you have to kind of explain it out. Like,
Yeah.
does God's anger smoke against, the sheep of his pasture? Well, sure, right? I mean, he allows Israel to be conquered. He allows Israel to go into captivity. He doesn't leave them there, though. So in the same way that he allows them to go to captivity, sure, his anger smokes against, his nation and his people that he set apart for himself. But you also, you want to put that big old asterisk next to that and say, like, well, yes, that does happen. However, not in the same way that it does towards the wicked, right? It's different. It's different. So this is just, hey, God, why do you cast us off forever? I'm talking to you as part of your people. Have you cast us off forever? Why is your anger smoking against the sheep of your pasture? If not, so if these things aren't true, and part of it is true, so we've kind of explained about your anger smoking against the sheep of your pasture. But what about, oh God, why do you cast us off forever? If that's not true, then why does the psalmist say that? Oh God, why do you cast us off forever?
It's kind of like you said, it's to show how desperate they are
Yeah.
because of how bad it is.
Yeah, it's how they feel.
Yeah.
Feels that way.
Yeah, it feels that way. Feels that way. Oh God, why have you cast us off forever? Oh, you have abandoned us. It feels that way. We know that that's not true. We know that God has not abandoned them. However, he says this because that's what it feels like. And sure, that's exactly what it would feel like if you're in the midst of everything that's going on. The temple's been sacked. The city's been conquered. You're being taken into captivity. Yeah, you're gonna feel that way. You're gonna feel that way. All right, question 3. What does verse 2 mean? Verse 2 says, "Remember your congregation which you have purchased of old, which you have redeemed to be the tribe of your heritage. Remember Mount Zion where you have dwelt." So first off, let's just talk about verse 2. What's it when it says, "Remember your congregation," what is he really asking God to do?
I think they're just pleading with to say, hey, remember the covenant you made with us.
Yeah.
We're yours.
So it feels like you've forgotten us. That's
Please.
not true, but please remember us, right? I mean, this is great formula for a prayer. Not only that, remember us who you have purchased from old. Like, don't forget what you've done for us in the past. Don't forget how you've saved us in the past. We're going to trust that you're going to save us again. You redeemed us to be the tribe of your heritage. So it's kind of an ask. It's
I can't spell to save my life. I'm like sitting here trying to like.
So the psalmist is asking God to remember his people, to remember his past acts of faithfulness. Because right now it feels that even though God has purchased Israel and saved Israel in the past, right now it feels like he's not protecting Israel. So this is just how it feels. He says at the end of verse 2 as well, remember Mount Zion where you have dwelt. Anytime that there's a mention of a place of God's presence, it's meant to infer God's presence. That be near to us, right? If he talks about the temple, right? I will go to you in the temple. In other words, I want to be near to you, God. If it talks about Mount Zion, it's the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It represents the closeness of God to his people. It represents God's power. It represents God's presence. So that's why that's there. Hey, remember who you are. Remember who we are to you. Remember what you've done for us in the past. Because right now it doesn't feel like you're remembering us. Make sense?
I was going to say it's kind of like what Moses, like they were thinking along the lines of Moses, like, hey, don't do this because of.
Yeah, like remember
Like
your
his
faithfulness,
plea.
and it's not to change God's mind, right? Because God doesn't
Exactly.
change his mind. God doesn't make mistakes in the sense that he needs to change his mind. But it is in the sense of if you feel like God is far away, whether he truly is or not, you're going to ask for him to be close. Just like we talked about before, that God has promised to never leave us nor forsake us. And for New Testament believers, you understand that you're indwelt with God's Holy Spirit at the moment of faith. The moment of genuine faith, you are saved and you are sealed by God's Holy Spirit indwelling you. And so when that's the case, you now know that God is always with you and he's closer than you could possibly understand. So he's never going to leave you nor forsake you, and he's definitely right there. But there's going to be times that it feels as though he's not right there. And when those times happen, even though you know he's there, you still pray and say, God, come close to me. God, please don't forsake me. Don't take your spirit from me, or things like that. Oh, you feel distant. Oh, I feel distant from you, or you feel distant from me. I don't like this feeling. Please restore right relationship with us, right? Please change the way that I'm feeling. And so that's really what's going on here. It's a reminding, rescue us like you've done in the past. Remember who you are. Remember who we are to you. It's not like God forgot. It's not like God's like, oh, that's right. Israel, right. Israel, right? Is it Israel or is it Israel? What was your name again? Like God didn't forget. So this is definitely more to the benefit of the psalmist and to the person praying than it is to God. What about question 4? What are verses 3 through 4 describing? He says, direct your steps to the perpetual ruins. The enemy has destroyed everything in the sanctuary. Your foes have roared in the midst of your meeting place. They set up their own signs for signs. Now, before you answer my question, remember the context, right? The context is nothing has changed between verses 1 and 2 as we get to verses 3 and 4. So we're in the exact same place. Nothing has changed. It's the same players, right? So if it was, who, what, where, why, when, it's all the same. Nothing has changed. So the context is exactly the same. So now, what are verses 3 through 4 describing? Remembering that everything is in the same context. When it says, direct your steps to the perpetual ruins, who's talking to who there? Who's asking who to direct their steps to the perpetual ruins? The psalmist is asking God to direct his steps to the perpetual ruins. What happened to the temple? It was destroyed. Ruins. God, direct your steps to the perpetual ruins. Come and see what the enemy has done. Direct your steps to the perpetual ruins. of your temple. So remember the context. The psalmist is saying, God, why have you forsaken us? Why are you not near us? Will you cast us off forever? Don't you see what the enemy has done? Remember your congregation of old, right? Oh God, why do you cast us off forever? Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture? Remember your congregation that you have purchased of old, which you have redeemed to be the tribe of your heritage. Remember Mount Zion, where you have dwelt. Remember who you are, who we are, what you've done for us in the past. And then direct your steps to the perpetual ruins of your temple. The enemy has destroyed everything in the sanctuary. The holy place of the temple has been desecrated. Come and see this, Lord. It's not that he doesn't think the Lord knows this happened. This is, Lord, are you far from us? I know you're not, but please don't be far from us, right? Yeah. And so this is like, Lord, come see the destruction. I know you already know that that's happened because you're God and you know everything, but come and see the perpetual ruins. The enemy has destroyed everything in the sanctuary. Your foes have roared in the midst of your meeting place. They set up their own signs for signs. Come and examine the damage of what your enemies have done. They have insulted you and mocked you by what they have done. This is what he's saying. Now they have taken down our distinguishing marks that were for you, and they've put up their own distinguishing marks or signs that are their own. You can think of it in the sense of, God's temple has been desecrated. Not only that, they put up their own flag instead of God's flag. Okay? Yeah. They've laid claim to it. They've insulted God. They've mocked God. They've mocked God's people. So this is what verses 3 and 4 are describing, is what the enemies have done to God's temple. Not only did they destroy it, they have defiled it. This is another way of saying that when you think about what's happening here, or being described here in this psalm, it is not only physical destruction of the temple, but a spiritual destruction of the temple.
Another way of trying to get God to come closer too.
Yeah. God, see what they did, not only to us, but look at what they did to you in your temple.
It's not just a feeling now.
Yeah, act. Now I'm giving you reasons to act. Mm-hmm. You didn't act. Right. Now I'm giving you reasons to act, yes. And then reasons to act would be not only, hey, remember who you are, remember who we are. Those are reasons to act. But now, up in the ante. Not only remember who you are and who we are, but come and see what your enemies have done to your holy place. As in, this is more reason to act, God. Question 5. What else did God's enemies do according to verses 5 through 8? Let's read verses 5 through 8. They were like those who swing axes in forests of trees, and all its carved wood they broke down with hatchets and hammers. They set your sanctuary on fire. They profaned the dwelling place of your name, bringing it down to the ground. They said to themselves, we will utterly subdue them. And they burned all the meeting places of God in the land. This is total destruction of God's sanctuary. And the psalmist is saying, look at how they've insulted you, God. Look at how they have defamed your honor. They have mocked your reputation. When it talks about lifting up your axe, it's just the idea that a lumberjack in a big forest of trees, what's he going to do? He's going to hack things down. He's going to destroy that forest. And that's what these guys were like. They were actively destroying your sanctuary, like how actively a lumberjack swings an axe in a forest. All the meeting places, all the different spots within the temple, all destroyed. This is utter destruction of the temple. So you get the idea. This is definitely, up to this point, lament. Lament, lament. Question 6. What do verses 9 through 11 mean? We do not see our signs. There is no longer any prophet. There is none among us who knows how long. How long, O God, is the foe to scoff? Is the enemy to revile your name forever? Why do you hold back your hand, your right hand? Take it from the fold of your garment and destroy them. So, according to verses 9 through 11, we'll talk about what they mean, but according to these verses, how does the psalmist respond to the destruction of the temple? He respond, before we answer what do these verses mean, how does he respond to the destruction of the temple? He asks God to, 3-letter word, starts with A and ends in A-C, act. Pleads for God to act.
I couldn't get this.
Yeah, I didn't think that one through all the way. I didn't think that. They don't all land, okay? All right. Sometimes I think of them too not long enough. They don't all land.
Split it after the C and the T, between the C and the T.
And then it's a. Well, thank you. I'll make a note of that for next time.
I'm here to help.
Everybody's a critic, let me tell you. Everybody, it's not easy sitting in this chair, people. Let me tell you.
No respect.
Let me
at all.
tell you. Yeah, no.
Total.
Yeah, some Rodney Dangerfield action. No respect. So he's asking God, even if it's just to protect your own reputation, please act. Please act. So that's how he's responding to the destruction of his temple. He doesn't say, God, I will go out and I will act for you. Right? That would be wrong. He's asking God to act. He's asking God to take, why are you holding back your hand, your right hand? Take it from the fold of your garment and destroy them. Act. You act, God. This is beyond me. You act. He says, we do not see our signs. They don't see any signs at all. Not only are anything that's in the temple that was kind of a sign for God and godly worship, that's all gone. That's all destroyed or taken or looted. But not only that, they don't see any signs of God's help. Right? It's not like they went in and went to go light the sanctuary and lightning bolts were coming down, and every time a guy would take a Zippo lighter and try and light something in the sanctuary on fire, a lightning bolt would come down and zap them. They're seeing no signs of God's miraculous help in this. So we don't see any kind of sign, be it physical or spiritual, be it something that was already in the temple as a sign or something that we would see as a sign of your help. We don't see any of that. We don't see any of that. They're also saying we don't have any prophets. We don't have any sign. Like a prophet would be the sign of God's presence with his people. We don't see that either. We don't have a prophet standard. We don't see that. We don't see that you're with your people. The prophets were in this time and age how God spoke to his people. You're not even talking to us right now. We don't see any signs. We don't hear anything from you because we don't have any prophets, which means we don't have any mouthpieces of God to tell us what you're thinking. Act. Help us, even if it's just for your own reputation. We'll benefit from your action. Defend your honor. How long will you let the enemy treat your name with disrespect or contempt? How long will you do that? Defend yourself, God. And by defending yourself, you'll be defending us. Why do you draw back, or why do you hold back your hand, your right hand? Why are you doing this? And God's right hand, anytime you hear the mention of God's right hand, it symbolizes might, power, strength. Yep. Why are you holding back? God, you could, bada bing, bada boom, man. You could zap them in no time. You got the power. Why are you holding the power back? Why? Why are you holding back your right hand of power when you could simply destroy them?
We still act like that today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, the promise we have today, more fully revealed through all of God's scripture, would be that, look, there will be a comeuppance. There will be a day when God comes as judge to judge everything. So everything that's done, everything that's hidden will be no longer hidden. Everything that's done will have to be accounted for, either through Christ or through the person who did it originally. And so we know that there will be vengeance will come. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And he also reminds us in Galatians that you do not be fooled. You will reap what you sow. God will judge, and he will judge fairly, and he will take care of business. So we know that, and that's very helpful to know that. Because we can lament and feel this way like the psalmist is feeling, and say, why does it feel like you're not moving on my behalf? Why does it feel like you're not moving? You know, why is this stuff happening? Why don't you use your power? Why are you holding back your right hand? You know, why are you letting these people mock you, God? Why are you letting people defame your honor? We ask those questions today, but we know why, right? It's all part of God's plan. It's all part of God's plan. Nobody's getting away with it.
Yeah.
So it's not like God, yes, God's being mocked, but God will repay. So it's not like God is going to be like, oh, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
In Daniel 7, it talks about, which we're going to be doing for our sermon on Sunday. In Daniel 7, it talks about the books are opened. You know what's in those books? Everything. Everything. You think you take good notes? God takes perfect notes. So everything is listed in these books that will be opened. So everything will be accounted for. God is the perfect judge. He will take care of everything perfectly. So I can rest knowing that, you know what? God's going to deal with it. I don't have to sit there and remind him. I don't have to sit there and be like worried, biting my fingernails that, well, I hope God gets that, that car salesman who sold me that lemon. And he, when I called him back, he laughed at me. I hope he gets his comeuppance, Hopefully God will remember. Of course God will remember, right? Or you might get to heaven and be like, hey, it's the car salesman guy.
That's a miracle you're here.
Yeah. Like, what? Like, Lord, did you know? Like,
Let me
You
open
meant it?
your book again.
that very well will happen. That some people will be like, what? God saved you? But you're really a wretch.
Show me your Carmack.
Show me, yeah.
Oh.
All right, verse 12.
Got it wrong.
That's okay. See, it's not easy. It's not easy.
No.
It's not easy being cheesy.
Oh, I'm losing you. Verse 12. Quick, before I lose you completely. Verse 12. Yet. Transitional word.
Yes.
Yet, God is my king from old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. You divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness. You split open springs and brooks. You dried up ever-flowing streams. Yours is the day, yours also the night. You have established the heavenly lights and the sun. You have fixed all the boundaries on the earth. You have made summer and winter. Do you see what's happening here? Notice, especially when we're going through it like this, when you get to verse 12, all of a sudden, change. Yet. That big word, yet. It's only 3 letters, but it indicates a big change. Yet. So now, everything changes. Attitude changes. Everything that's being said is now changing from a lament to something else. You have fixed the boundaries of the earth, verse 17. You have made summer and winter. Remember this, O Lord, how the enemy scoffs, and a foolish people reviles your name. Do not deliver the soul of your dove to the wild beasts. Do not forget the life of your poor forever. Have regard for the covenant, for the dark places of the land are full of the habitations of violence. Let not the downtrodden turn back in shame. Let the poor and needy praise your name. Arise, O God, defend your cause. Remember how the foolish scoff at you all the day. Do not forget the clamor of your foes, the uproar of those who rise against you, which goes up continually. Question 7. What mighty acts of God does the psalmist recall in verses 12 through 17, and why does he do it? Let's do the what first. Yet my God is king from old. One act of God is right there in verse 12. Working what?
Salvation.
Working salvation in the midst of the earth. What's another mighty act of God according to verse 13? You divided what? Mm-hmm. You divided the sea by your might. Same verse. He's also done what? Broken the head of sea monsters. The idea of sea monsters would be what we would consider uncontrollable power. God is controlling. You see a sea monster and you go, oh, a sea monster. I can't fight it. It's too powerful for me. And God goes, snap. No problem. Next. Right? So what we would consider overwhelming or uncontrollable to God, child's play. No problem. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave him his food to the creatures of the wilderness. The sea monster, a legendary sea monster that would symbolize chaos and earthly physical power, would be Leviathan. You couldn't think of if I had to give the biggest possible, what's a physical animal that I could think of that would be the biggest symbol of uncontrollable worldly power that I can't fathom dealing with, and I would say Leviathan, and to God, Leviathan is nothing. Puppy dog. Like Rufus running around. Aw, Rufus. If you're interested to read more about Leviathan, you can go to Job 41.
Yes.
There's quite a bit of a description of Leviathan there.
Good. Powerful description.
Oh, yes. And other places in Job as well, you get other descriptions of God's might, right? Job is complaining, and God says, who is this that darkens my counsel, who speaks words without knowledge? Rise yourself up like a man and answer me if you can.
Mm-hmm.
And then after Job changes his pants, he stands there in awe of God's might, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you make the eagle proud? Did you tell the waters to go here and no further? Can you tell me where the storehouses of snow are? And Job was going, nope. Nope. What about, I'm skipping down, sorry here. You split open the springs. God provided water from the rock in Israel's wilderness in Exodus 17.
These are just all examples of God's power.
Exactly. Examples of God's power. Now, when you're lamenting, when you're full of fear, doubt, anxiety, and all that stuff, and you get to the point where you're done lamenting, right? This is what we do. Oh, God, I don't know what to do. There's all this stuff going on right now. I am lost. I feel like you're far from me. I don't know what to do. And you get to that point where you've done that. You've gushed, right? And then comes the yet, right? We all get that. You gush, and then you get to the yet. And then what do you do when you get to the yet? You recall God's greatness, and you do that by recalling all the things that God has done. And this is just a small sample of the mighty things that God has done. And so this is what we do too. What the psalmist is doing is what we do too. We remember what God has done, not just in the Bible, but what we have seen God do in our own lives as well. Hey, God, I've been walking with you now for 20 years, and it is clear to me that you have saved me on more than one occasion. I remember this, I remember that, I remember how you used to do this, I remember how you saved me from that. And you can go through the list and be like, boy, you have been faithful. And you've brought me thus far. Certainly I can trust you to bring me the rest of the way. Or you can go into God's scripture and be like, boy, I remember when the Israelites, they failed you too, yet you still saved them. Oh, I see how they failed you and you punished them, but you also rescued them from that punishment eventually. You corrected them, but you didn't leave them in correction. You brought them out of the wilderness eventually. You do that. That's what we do. That's what we do. We look and we see and remember when we get to that point of yet, you do that. You look to God, you remember his might and his characteristics, right? So why, the second part of question 7, why does the psalmist do this? Why is he recalling mighty acts of God? He lamented.
Reassurance.
Reassurance.
Yeah, it's a good reassurance.
Reassurance. And the reassurance comes from what? He's reassured. He's not reassured by himself. He's not recounting his great works. He's not recounting the great works of Israel. Oh, you remember when we walked around Jericho? Man, did we strut good. Oh, were we all in line. Oh, did we? Nope.
I love that.
The mighty acts that he's remembering are God's acts, right? So the reassurance that Kathy rightly points out is from God. God's power, God's might, God's faithfulness, the examples of what God has done. So that's why he's doing this. That's why, and that's exactly what we would do when you go, oh, everything's falling apart. Boy, is this you correcting me, God? Is this you refining me or correcting me or both?
Yeah.
Right? Or are you doing this because you've got something else in mind? What's going on? I need to remind myself of your faithfulness. I need to remind myself of your might. I need to remind myself that you're in control, that you're sovereign, and that I'm going to be okay because you've always been faithful to me even when I'm not faithful to you. Reassurance. What about question 8? What does the psalmist ask God to recall in verses 18 and 19? He says, remember this, right? Hey God, remember this, O Lord, how the enemy scoffs, and a foolish people reviles your name. Do not deliver the soul of your dove to the wild beast. Do not forget the life of the poor forever. So what's the psalmist asking God to recall in those verses?
They're scoffing.
Yeah, remember the insults that these people put against you, God. May that prompt you to act. He's also asking God not just to recall the insults that his enemies have spewed at him.
Not to forget the poor.
Yep, in verse 19. Don't forget those who are afflicted, your people who are afflicted. Don't let your inaction be taken as forgetfulness. Both verses 18 and 19 are meant for the psalmist is asking God to recall these things in order to prompt God to act. Now, do you think that God at this very moment is sitting up in heaven on the throne, listening to the psalmist and going, all right, I'll act, you've prompted me. I forgot how they called me what's that thing from the movie Elf? A cotton hat and ninny muffin? Yeah. Yeah. I forgot that they called me that. You're right. You've prompted me to act. Right? No.
Our niece Lucy says that all the time.
Cotton pickin' ninny muffin.
Ninny muffin.
Yeah. Hey God, don't forget that those people called you that. You should be mad and you should act. And God's up in heaven going, you're right. That was pretty, a dink move by those guys. That was a pretty dink move. I should act. Is that what God's doing? Or is God sovereignly in control? He already knows exactly what he's going to do. He's already decreed. He's already declared. God's not reactionary, in other words. He's not listening to this and going, oh, okay, I should act all of a sudden. But it is good. But it's useful to still do this, even though God is not swayed by
I
this.
find, do not deliver the soul of your dove to the wild beast. That's kind of frightening.
Yeah, that if God would do
It's a
it.
frightening moment when
Mhm.
someone
Yeah,
feels
that's-
that way.
Yeah.
You're going to take my soul away from God at that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, imagine this too, okay? Imagine that you're somebody who is a faithful one of God. You're living in Jerusalem, and Nebuchadnezzar comes to sack Jerusalem, right? And let's say you're a faithful one, all right? Let's say there's two faithful people, person A and person B, both faithful to God. Nebuchadnezzar comes, he sacks the temple, and Babylonians are destroying everything, right? Person A, who's faithful to God, killed in the destruction, okay? Killed in the temple and in the midst of all this destruction. Person B, not killed in that, sent into captivity into Babylon. Okay? Did God fail either one of those two?
No.
Why not? Because somebody would say that, right? They'd say, well, God didn't fail person B yet because he's just in captivity. But person A, well, they died and they were faithful, so why did they have to die? Their time to die. And how does God not fail either one? We know that God does not fail person A or person B, but how does God not fail either of them? He allowed person A to die. How is that not failing them? Because there's people in the world who would say, like, well, that's failing. Well, that's just it, right? Right? That's the ultimate.
Destination.
Right. If you're faithful, and that's kind of like, the fine print, is that, well, there is no downside?
No.
The downside is you're going to the Lord?
I'll be the B guy. Just let's be done.
Well, that's
Let's
it.
have to go to
Some people,
captivity.
then this is the point that some people miss, right?
Yes.
The B guy might say, hey, how come they get to go and be with you now and I got to go suffer in captivity?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So, so both person A and person B put their trust in the Lord, and both person A and person B have to put their trust in the Lord in the sense that, look, God might take my life tomorrow. Or God might spare my life but send me into captivity, Either way, I'm meant to serve him.
Exactly.
And either way, I'm putting my trust in him, no matter where he's put me, that he is sovereign and that he's in control, that he's not reacting, but that he is dictating. And so it stays the same regardless of which position you're in. Hey, Lord, do not deliver the soul of your dove to wild beasts. Your dove it's your precious soft bird, like your believers. Don't deliver us into the hands of wild beasts. Don't forget your afflicted ones. Instead, remember us. Don't forget the life of the poor. Don't abandon us. So it's still the same, like, hey, don't abandon us. Don't do this. Don't do that. Help us. But I think it's important to note that, hey, person A and person B both have put their faith and trust in God. One receives death. The other receives captivity. But in the end, they both receive eternal life.
Exactly.
I want to be the one that dies.
Captivity wouldn't be fun, right?
Well-
Go to a pagan country.
Yeah.
Go to all that. Well, that's just it. That's why Paul says, do I stay and help you, or do I go? It's much better for me if I go to the Lord, but it's much better for you, simpletons, if I stay here and help you, right?
Yep.
Because he knows, yeah, it'd be far better for me. Heck yeah, I'd rather die and go and be with the Lord forever and ever. No more pain, no more sorrow, no more suffering, no more tears.
I'm out of here.
Revelation 21:4. Yeah. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, be with him in paradise forever and ever. Or go into captivity and suffer as a slave.
Yeah.
But either one, God might, God withholds death. You read in the book of Revelation, right? People who are still thumbing their noses at God. 100-pound stones falling on them from the sky. And they curse God and shake their fists at him, right? Instead of repenting.
Yeah.
And they see, or they're being stung, by the demons that come from the pit, and they look for death, and death flees from them.
Yes.
Like God will keep death from happening from people that he does not want death to have, right? God's in control of life and death. And so you see this in every which way. So ultimately, what can you and I do? Nothing. Nothing. There's nothing you can do. All you can do is put your faith and trust in God, serve him, and be obedient to him. And then you won't have to worry. You can say, look, I'm serving God, I'm living for him, and what's happening to me, because I know that I am serving God and living for him, whatever's happening to me, I know is in line with his will. I know it's not punishment, so it must be refining if I'm obedient to him. Now, if I know I'm not being obedient to him, I can say, well, God could be refining me, but he could also be, reprimanding me right now, because he chastises those that he loves.
Yes.
So then, what am I going to do? Am I going to be the teenager who goes, forget you, God, I don't like you, Dad, and then you run down the hallway and slam your door? Or are you going to be the teenager who goes, I don't like you right now, but I see that you're trying to do what's best for me?
Here's
Which-
the teenagers that actually said that.
No, I don't know anybody. I was going to say Jesus, but that's not right. Maybe not. You can dare to dream, right? You can dare to dream that there's a teenager somewhere who... Now, what usually happens is when teenagers become parents themselves, and then they go through the very thing that they themselves put their parents through, and then they realize, oh no. Oh no, right?
Oh, I'm glad I never had kids.
Oh, gosh.
All right. I think we've flushed out question 8. What about question 9? What do verses 20 through 21 mean? Have regard for the covenant, for the dark places of the land are full of the habitation of violence. Let not the downtrodden turn back in shame. Let the poor and needy praise your name. Let's take verse 20 first. Have regard for the covenant, for the dark places of the land are full of habitations of violence. What does that mean? What does verse 20 mean?
I'd say it's still more trying to provoke for action.
Sure, because
Hey, your covenant,
he's
come
using the
on.
language of
Yeah.
covenant, right? Like, hey, God, remember your covenant that you yourself set up. And he's referring to the Abrahamic covenant there. So another way of thinking about this would be like, bad things are happening to Israel because Israel was apostate. Okay? So you had a bunch of Israel that was apostate. It was turning from God, wasn't doing things God told them to do, and was apostate. God, however, is still obligated to maintain the Abrahamic covenant that he promised to Abraham all the way back in Genesis 17. So the psalmist is saying, hey God, don't forget your covenant. Don't forget your prior commitment. Don't forget what you promised. This is not telling God, don't pour out judgment. This is just telling God, don't forget your covenant. In other words, it's not saying, God, you're wrong for pouring out judgment, or God, you're wrong for allowing this to happen to your people. You notice that language is never used. Never. Never is the psalmist saying, God, you fool. Or God, if you were really loving, you would never let this happen. Like that kind of talk is not present here at all. Instead, what you hear here is yes, your people have failed you, and yes, your nation has turned from you, but remember your covenant. Remember how you said that you would save a people for yourself. Can't have a people for yourself if you don't help us. Again, it's kind of a call to action and a call to remembrance of what God has said and what God has done and what God has said he will do. What about, and then the dark places of the land are full of habitation. The land is dark. Times are bad. Violence everywhere. That's all that means. What about verse 21? Let not the downtrodden turn back in shame. Let the poor and needy praise your name. What's that saying? What's that mean? Let not the downtrodden turn back in shame. Let the poor and needy praise your name. You know what's interesting here is that there are no specifics. There's a wide berth for God to operate in that, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Verse 21, let not the downtrodden turn back in shame. Let the poor and needy praise your name. It doesn't say, God, do not let one person in Israel die. God, do not let one person in Israel go through difficulties or hardships or hard times or anything like that. It doesn't even say, let all the apostate of Israel go through the hard stuff, but let everybody who's faithful to you skirt through completely untouched. It doesn't say any of that. There's this really wide berth here for God to operate. And the assumption is that God will do what is right in his eyes. And that whatever he decides to do is right, good, and perfect. So when it says, let not the downtrodden turn back in shame, and let the poor and needy praise your name, it doesn't say specifically. Now, God could, let's say there's 1,000 Israelites who are being affected by what we're reading in Psalm 74. God might choose to have 700 of them be downtrodden and shamed. And he might choose 300 of them to not be downtrodden and shamed. Or God might reverse those numbers. Or God might have 2 or 3 compared to 997. You see what I'm saying? Like this, there's wide berth to God to decide. The psalmist is just, again, pleading for God to act, but allowing God to choose the way in which he acts and in what God does. That's faith. That's faith. Because he's not telling God what to do. Mm-hmm. Some people will read this and be like, well, he's kind of telling God what to do. No, he's not. There's a really wide berth here. Be merciful. Act. Don't let the downtrodden turn back in shame. Save some of your people. Act. But you choose how you act, God. Let the poor and needy praise your name. When God does act, the response will be praise. The praise of his name. The praise of his name. Question 10. What's being said in verses 22 and 23? Arise, O God, defend your cause. Remember how the foolish scoff at you all the day. Do not forget the clamor of your foes, the uproar of those who rise against you, which goes up continually! Exclamation point. Explanation point. It's been a long day, people. Exclamation point. Boom. Boom. He doesn't want God to forget his people, but he also does not want God to forget what? According to verses 22 and 23. What's that? Their wrongs. The insults from his enemies. God, you're correcting your people Israel right now. Don't forget us. But also, don't forget our enemies who are your enemies, who just came in, destroyed the temple, took down all our signs, put up all their own signs. It's probably somebody playing with a
Do you think
recorder or
somebody's yelling
something.
for help?
No, it's somebody playing, a kid playing with a recorder.
Probably Micah.
That doesn't sound like her.
Probably is Micah.
Okay, that scared me, friend. I thought someone was out there yelling.
I thought it was a cat.
Probably Micah.
So this is again an appeal, right? The psalmist is again appealing for God. Defend your cause. Arise. This is, hey, arise, right? I can't act if I don't get out of this chair. Arise. Act. Defend your cause, God. Remember, see, he just got done reminding or asking God to remember his people. Now he's ending by asking God to remember his enemies. So this is full circle. Remember everything, God. Remember who you are. Remember who we are. Remember your enemies. Remember all of this stuff and act. And act. Questions about Psalm 74?